Appreciate everybody joining. Just wanted to make sure you're seeing my title slide, Liz.
I am.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. Happy Tuesday morning. It's good to be here and good to have you all with us. It's a busy time. It is conference season again, and I'm excited because it's been a long break from conference events, and a lot of things have happened in the industry. Let me just introduce myself very quickly. We're talking about both SQL Server Reporting Services and Paginated Reports today, and specifically report recipes. And I'll introduce what that means and talk about kind of where that came from. My name is Paul Turley. I'm a principal consultant with 3 Cloud Solutions. We are the largest 100% Azure-based consultancy and Microsoft partner. And we do consulting and training work across the entire spectrum across Azure. I work within the data and analytics group, work with a lot of clients to deliver business intelligence and analytics solutions using Paginated Reports, Power BI, and other analytic tools from Microsoft on the Azure platform. All right, what are we talking about today? Well, I'm going to share with you some content from a previous book that I led the authoring effort with, and then a revision of that book, which is available for free online, and I'll point you to those resources. And we're going to talk a little bit about where reporting services came from, how operational reports can be created, and then how to integrate operational reports into the Power BI service with Paginated Reports. A little about me very quickly. I actually started out in the TV news business. I really enjoyed making pictures and video, and I thought that television production was where I was going to go. So I was working on a college degree, and I actually had an injury that put me in a desk, and I ended up working on the help desk for a software company and really enjoyed working with software, particularly with data. So I got into IT training and then eventually BI analytics. So I started working with healthcare software until I broke my foot, and I ended up in a desk job, and that actually ended up being a very good experience for me. So life does that sometimes. So did IT training and consulting for a while. Really liked the balance of both being in the classroom and being out in the field and solving real world problems, coming back and sharing that experience with people. In 2003, I found data reporting and BI, which was just about the time that SQL Server Reporting Services was in early development, and fell in love with the product. Actually implemented it in a web application that I had developed. And we integrated SQL Server Reporting Services, and then had the opportunity to work with the folks at Rocks Press and then eventually John Wiley Publishing to write a few books about reporting services. And so I've been the lead author on the entire series of books from Rocks Press on SQL Server Reporting Services. I became a member of the Microsoft MVP program in 2009, and now in my 11th year. Went to work for Pragmatic Works, and Pragmatic Works was acquired by a larger and growing company a little over a year ago in August of 2000, and that's the company that I work for today, 3 Cloud Solutions, who are presenting this webinar for you. 3 Cloud is growing. Business is good. There's been a lot of migration to the cloud, particularly Azure, and we have been in a leadership mode with Azure adoption and particularly data adoption within Azure. So it's been an exciting time. Speaking of exciting times, on a personal note, this last year, my wife and I decided we needed an adventure, wanted to do something a little bit different. And so we literally sold the house and went on the road. And that's what we're doing now. You may notice that my background and surroundings are a little bit different. That's because I'm actually on the road, coming to you from Atlanta. We actually arrived from Red Bay, Alabama last night in Atlanta, and actually work full-time on the road from what we call the data bus. And you're welcome to follow our journey on my newer blog, Data on the Road. And then I'll also point you to my personal blog where I blog about technology and my learnings and all things in the Microsoft data space at SQLServerBIblog.com. So let me just point you to those blogs real quick. So this is my blog, which has been going on for about well, since 2009. So it's where I blog about reporting and BI and analytics and the data platform and fairly technical focus, and where you will find material that supports this presentation. And then the new blog that I just mentioned, Data on the Road, dataontheroad.blog. And one of the things that I am doing to support the community is, as we travel, I'm meeting with and interviewing professionals in the community. So community leaders, folks who run user groups and speak at conferences, and folks like Adam Saxton here, who's hosts the Guy in a Cube channel and Saturday morning live streams, and other folks in our circles who are strong community leaders, both at 3Cloud and out in the community at large. So you're welcome to follow that, and I hope you find it interesting. All right, back to our presentation. So what is SQL Server Reporting Services and Power BI Paginated Reports? How are the two connected, and what do they have to do with each other? So way back in 2003, Microsoft released to preview the first edition of SQL Server Reporting Services, which was kind of an evolution of some earlier efforts. Microsoft had developed Microsoft Access, which was and continues to be a very popular reporting tool. There were earlier efforts around Visual Basic and Visual Studio with some reporting capabilities, and all of that kind of evolved into SQL Server Reporting Services, which was officially released in January of 2004, but I began a recent presentation with late December back in 2003. What a very special time for me. We actually released the first edition of our reporting services book, and that's where the journey began. In 2005, SSRS was bundled with SQL Server, so it actually installed with the product in SQL Server 2005. There were several improvements made to reporting services between 2005 and 2010. The product matured, and I think a lot of folks kind of saw it as being fully baked right around 2010. And it drifted for a little while. Then we saw some incremental improvements between 2012 and 2016. But in 2018, when Power BI really became kind of the new shiny thing, that was the tool that most people were paying attention to in terms of reporting and analytics and kind of a modern self-service experience. 2018, SQL Server Reporting Services was kind of retrofitted into the Power BI service, made available as what's now known as Paginated Reports in Power BI. And it really kind of revitalized the effort with the one kind of gap that it was only available through premium capacity, which for smaller businesses was kind of a big price tag. And so until just recently, this past year, Power BI released or made available a premium per user licensing mode that made that price tag much more approachable for smaller businesses. And Paginated Reports has become wildly popular since that time because it's now affordable and fairly easy to use. Let's see that this slide builds, but these are the books that we have written on SQL Server Reporting Services in the past. In circa 2010, Robert Bruckner and I, Robert was one of the engineers on the reporting services product team. Robert and I co-authored and kind of led the lead authoring experience with a number of other contributors, creating what we called a report recipe book. And we published 63 recipes, or essentially how to accomplish certain things, how to solve certain business problems, how to design according to certain patterns in this recipe book. And that book has actually been very, very popular. It was published in 2010, so that was quite a while ago. But that's been a very, very popular book. The other books were all kind of attached to a particular version of reporting services in SQL Server. This one was not. It's still relevant today, in my opinion. I've presented about reporting services at a number of conferences. Now, these are all the past summit conferences. You can see the first one that I presented was back in 2007, designing super reports. Same thing in 2009, updated that. You can see the companies I was working for at the time. Cooking with reporting services. We introduced the concept of the report recipe. And then did a number of presentations about visual design titled, Visual Report Design, Bringing Sexy Back, making reports pop and making them very, very visual, before Power BI was released. So I mention this because for a couple of reasons. One, the PASS Community Summit is actually happening this week. And the regular sessions are free. The pre-cons are actually going on right now, today and tomorrow. And actually, I guess yesterday and today. And the regular sessions begin tomorrow and go through the 10th, 11th, and 12th. And it's free, which means you can attend these sessions. Some of the sessions are presented live. Some of them are recorded with a live Q&A with the presenter at the end. But if you're not signed up for the PASS Community Summit, I would strongly recommend that you register, even if you don't have the flexibility in your schedule to attend a lot of the sessions. By registering now, you can watch the keynotes and perhaps attend a few sessions, but then you can watch the recordings later. So strongly recommend that you do that. It's a great opportunity. All right, let's get to our topic at hand and talk about SSRS and paginated reports. So we're going to both kind of talk about legacy operational reports and then talk about what's new and perhaps what's coming. Or I can't make any promises about what Microsoft is going to do, but I do kind of have a crystal ball into what the product team is working on and what some of their priorities are, though I can't promise anything. But I have friends on the product team, and I've worked with a lot of the folks who actually develop and maintain these products, and so I have a little bit of insight into what their priorities are. Okay, so flexibility versus simplicity. So how do you create a simple operational report and then give a user the flexibility of hiding and showing columns and being able to parameterize things and change visual characteristics. I'm going to start with some basic reporting building blocks. Talk about how you can customize reports a bit through using parameters and expressions. We will back up a little bit and talk about different reporting tool choices, because you have a number of different tools that you can use, which might include SQL Server on-prem, paginated reports in the Power BI service, Power BI desktop and the Power BI service, and even using Excel as a reporting tool, which may be the best choice under certain conditions, and what those best practices are. Okay, so why are there two reporting tools? If we go back to some of those earlier past conference presentations that I did, making reports sexy and creating dashboard style reports, reporting services was the tool that we had at the time. It was the only tool from Microsoft that allowed you to create dashboard style and highly visual reports. With some interactivity and with some flexibility, the ability to click on a chart and be able to see related, information in a table or a matrix, etc. But because the industry's kind of evolved to a point where that's become the norm, that's the expectation that business users have, that they expect to click on a bar in a chart and see other visuals, respond to those actions. Power BI has become kind of the de facto tool in a lot of businesses for doing analytical type reporting rather than reporting services. Now we have overlap between the two tools. So The choice is not always perfectly clear. If the requirement is to create a visual report that has a chart, table next to it, and for that to be interactive, I want to be able to, filter by region. I want to be able to click on a bar and see the related transactions that bar represents. Power BI is probably a natural fit for that kind of thing, but you can do the same thing in reporting services / paginated reports. So reporting services was designed at a time when we generally wrote SQL for everything. It's optimized for SQL queries. And you can use it with SQL Server, Azure SQL Database, Oracle, and a variety of other relational tools. Can you use reporting services with a modern data warehouse, a data lake with Databricks, with Synapse? Yes, you can, because there are SQL endpoints for a lot of those things. But reporting services was also designed at a time when generally IT developers did all of the report design. Therefore, it's a tool that was really optimized for that experience, not so much for the casual, less technical self-service user. In reporting services, you can base pretty much any property on an expression, which means there's a lot of flexibility, but you can also get into the deep end of the pool and get to a point where you have to debug and troubleshoot, and things can get complicated. So switching over to Power BI was really optimized for analytic, non-transactional queries. In other words, we build a data model that is really designed to analyze summary and aggregate information and then interact with that via a data model under the covers. And if you want to report on transactional details, you can, but it's not always appropriate to put hundreds of millions of rows of transactions into a data model just so a user can see it in a table and maybe export it to Excel or interact with it, in Excel. So you really have to think about what the tool was designed for and choose the right tool based on those needs. Can you do transactional reporting with Power BI? Yes, you can. Can you do analytic and highly visual reporting with reporting services / paginated reports? Yes, you can, but think about what the tool was optimized for. All right, let me pause here. I know that we have some questions, and let me just go through them here real quick. Will the session be recorded? Yes. And I know that Doreen and Liz are also answering these questions, so I won't spend a lot of time on them. Donald, thank you so much for your comment. Is there a PDF agenda file anywhere? I don't know the answer to that question. Do you see any significant updates coming to SSRS? So far, it looks like Microsoft is, I'm not seeing the rest of the question. It's primarily focused on paginated reports. Okay. Paris, let me just comment on that briefly. I think that your observation is accurate. And I won't speak entirely for Microsoft, and we'll also try to keep things on a positive note. Microsoft wants their customers in the cloud. That's where their effort goes. They are a cloud-first company. They've made that very, very clear in their messaging. Microsoft, I think, like any bottom line driven company, is going to go where their customers are. But they're also a market leader. They have to take their resources and focus them. And that's on the cloud. It really is. On-premises reporting is secondary. Microsoft will continue to support SQL Server Reporting Services, but it's going to be after they've made this investment into the cloud. So what does that mean? Well, it means that after they have added new features to the Power BI service, and or to other aspects of their Azure cloud services, that as it's convenient, they will then trickle those features down to the on-premises product. And that's really been their pattern for the past couple of years. Not everyone is thrilled with that, but that's a reality. So yes, we will see innovation in reporting services on-prem. We will see new features added, but there's going to be a latency between when those features are shipped to the cloud and when they eventually make it down to the to on-prem. Like it or not, that's reality, and I think it's important to recognize that that's what drives Microsoft. All right, don't shoot the messenger. Same report technology, different names. So how does all of this fit together? And if you've been along for the ride with reporting services, you know that there was an era when reporting services was, standalone product, standalone service. You installed it along with SQL Server, and that created a web server. You opened your browser and you went to the address of the web server, and there are your reports, and you ran the reports, and that was it. And then there was an era where it was very popular to integrate with SharePoint. And so SharePoint became kind of the center of the universe. And so, Microsoft have gone through this progression, one kind of following the industry as customers have wanted central portals and everything consolidated. Now everything's in the cloud. And so that's why we've kind of moved to, the focus being in Azure. That's not a fad. I think that will continue to be the focus for a very, very long time. And I think it's important to recognize that. Okay, so what are the different flavors of operational reports? So as Paris's question alluded to, SQL Server Reporting Services installs as an add-in to Microsoft SQL Server on-prem, on your server or a VM. It used to be that when you installed SQL Server, you just check a box to install reporting services. Now you actually download reporting services separately so that you always get the latest version. There is another flavor of reporting services called Power BI Report Server, and that's also a separate download. It looks and feels exactly like reporting services. There are two differences. One is that you can deploy a Power BI from Power BI Desktop, a PBIX file, to your report server on-prem, and you can interact with Power BI. The licensing model for Power BI Report Server is also different. It is available as part of SQL Server Enterprise. If you have software assurance, it's also part of Power BI Premium capacity. We won't get into the weeds there, but just know that is a licensing requirement. And then in the Power BI service, we have Paginated Reports, which is what we're going to be looking at. I need to keep moving. So I'm gonna skip this slide, but just use this as a footnote to say that look at your reporting needs. When the business requirements are to create a report that is based on transactional data, show lists of things that might be grouped, and the ability to drill through or drill down to details, that might describe an operational report, and reporting services or paginated reports may be the best tool to use for that. If the report requirements are, I want to see a dashboard style report that allows a business user to see data in aggregate, to be able to interact with it, perhaps to drill down or drill through, as I'm going to show you, that describes an analytic reporting need, and those are different. And one of the differences is that behind that analytic report created with Power BI, there must be a data model. You must model that data so it's optimized for analytic reporting. All right. Paginated reports, SSRS, are based on a format called RDL. Okay, that's report definition language. Keep in mind that this was architected back in 2002, 2003, when XML was kind of king. So it is an XML definition. There's all kinds of stuff in there. It's very code-based. I'm going to move quickly so that we can get to demonstrations here pretty quick. The tool that you use to create paginated reports is called Power BI Report Builder. Now, there are a couple flavors of Report Builder. Back in the day, we used Visual Studio through an add-in called Business Intelligence Development Studio, or BIDS. BIDS evolved into SSDT, SQL Server Data Tools, which included the Report Designer, the Analysis Services Model Designer, integration services package designer that was all packaged together. You can continue to use SSDT for Visual Studio to author reports that you publish on-prem. You can author those reports in Visual Studio, and then you can use Power BI Report Builder to publish them to the Power BI service, but we don't have the ability to publish from Visual Studio. Quite honestly, the Visual Studio Designer will likely not be supported sometime in the future. So if you have reports that you've developed in Visual Studio, think about moving them into the appropriate version of Report Builder, because that's what the product team will be supporting mainly into the future. So here you can see that I create data sources, I create data sets, which is the reporting services name for queries, the report body and report items. And if this were a 3-day training class, we would get into the weeds and talk about exactly what a report body is versus the report, versus you know, report items versus data ranges and things like that. Okay, data regions. A data region is a visual object within the report that repeats data. Okay, the simplest object is a table. A version of that data region can also be a list, which is free form. You place text boxes anywhere you want, they get repeated per each grouping. And then a more sophisticated version is called a matrix. Under the covers, this is all the same object. It's called a tablix, but for the casual report designer, they don't need to deal with that level of sophistication. So this is a way of repeating things. Then we have report visuals. Oops, I don't have a slide on that. This was an abbreviated presentation. We also have report visuals such as charts, gauges, text boxes, spark lines, indicators, etc. Okay, I'm going to move to this slide so that we can start talking about report recipes. So what inspired the whole recipe concept was Robert Bruckner, who was my lead co-author on the recipe book, was making presentations in conferences where he was just doing crazy things with reporting services. In particular, Robert would present at the BI Power Hour sessions at Past Summit, TechEd, and other conferences, and create things like a tic-tac-toe game or a battleship game with reporting services. Now, if your objective was to go out and write a battleship game, I wouldn't suggest that reporting services would be the first choice to create something that sophisticated, but what he was demonstrating was that it was possible. The tool was so flexible that you could use very, creative techniques to provide interactivity, to hide and show things and process business logic. And so that inspired this idea of recipes. And the idea is I need to create a report that drills through to a Power BI report. How do I do that? Well, you have ingredients, i.e. skills and tools. What product version do you need in order to do that? What's the difficulty level? And then we actually solicited input from a number of different people who had done interesting things with reporting services, and we had a number of different people who had contributed these recipes. So I'm going to show you some of these. And again, there are 63 recipes in our report recipe book, and then we have 18 new recipes that are available on my blog. I'm going to show you where to go to get that. So this was the 2020 update to the recipes. I actually was working with a publisher to publish a new book. So in 2019, I talked to the publisher and had pitched the idea of doing an updated recipe book. They were all for it. We had a contract, we had a number of contributors, and we got partway through that effort, and then this pandemic happened. Everybody got distracted, their priorities all got rearranged, and so we got a number of these recipes done, but it wasn't enough to actually print a book, and the publisher really said, you know what, with the pandemic going on, our priorities have changed, and we're not going to publish a book. You can have the rights to everything that you've done, and so I've made this available for free. You can download all of these recipes, and actually all of the content that we had written as part of this 2020 update. So I'll show you where to go to find all 18 of these recipes. Okay, let's jump off and take a look at a report recipe. So I'm going to start with one of the most basic reports. If you've been working with reporting services for any length of time, you probably know how to do this. If you're new to reporting services or paginated reports, this will be a good introduction to using things like expressions. So here I have a very simple report open in Report Builder. As you can see, it has a data source. So I'm connected to a demo database. So we created a copy of the Contoso DW database called the Paginated Report Data. And if you go and download the instructions, you can download a backup of this SQL Server database. And then created a very, very simple query. Just for our purposes, this is just transactional sales order data. Super simple stuff. Well, if I plop a bunch of rows into a table, by default, I'm just going to get a white background with black text, and it can be hard to follow. Back in the day, when tabular reports were created, they were printed on what we called green bar paper, and that made it easy to differentiate each of the rows. So if I want to create a green bar style report, well, how do I do that? It's not a feature of SQL Server Reporting Services or paginated reports, but I can change the back color or background color property of all of the cells in this row. And I can just do that by selecting the actual row itself and going to background color. And you can see that I can either choose a color or I can build an expression. And this is the expression. Simple stuff. Again, this is Expressions 101. You're looking at VisualBasic.net expression code, simple stuff. So here I have an immediate if, which is a conditional if. We're saying, okay, if it's this, if the expression yields true, then we're going to return this value. If it's false, then we're going to return this value. And you can see that in the simplicity of VB.NET expressions, I don't have to cast objects as, or values as, as color objects, that kind of thing. I can just return strings. And so I'm just going to say, all right, get the row number of my current row. And I'm passing nothing to it. I didn't mean to X that out. I'm passing nothing, which means I'm saying I don't want to group on anything. I just want the lowest level of detail. So I get the row number, and I'm going to use the modulus operator, which is an integer division, and that's either going to be an even number or an odd number. So if I divide by 2 and I have a remainder of 1, then that means that is an odd numbered row. If I divide by 2 and have a remainder of 0, then that means it's an even number of row. And that does this. I'm trying to run the report. Oops, I forgot I needed to store my credentials. Okay, and you can see that I have this Gainsborough gray background on every other row. Okay, really exciting stuff, right? So let's jump over and say, okay, well, I want to take that to the next level now. So we're going to graduate from, 101 to 102 level stuff now. Get back here on my other screen. I didn't see that opened up on my other screen, so I double-clicked it twice, and I opened this report twice, which is not what I intended to do. Let me close those real quick. All right, got myself into trouble here. Let me just close that and close that. All right, the demo gods are unkind today. I'm so sorry, I've got to close down. My window's stuck on another screen and I can't move it. Pull this down so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so same report, but I've also added a parameter called freight threshold. So since we have a freight amount here, and let me run the report so you can see what I'm trying to do. Oops, I'm in all caps. All right, so what I want to do is just say, all right, if this value is above a certain threshold, then I want to highlight these rows. So you can see that right now that threshold is 50. If I set it to 100, you'll see only those values. If I set it to something very low, let's say $10, you'll see that most of them are going to be magenta. So how is that done? So I've added a parameter. You can see that that's an integer type parameter. I've given it a default value of 50, but it just shows up as a text box up in the parameter bar. And within the report itself, I'm just adding a little more logic to my expression. And I'm saying, okay, well, you know, not only am I going to do the modulus thing and figure out if that's an odd or even row, but I'm going to evaluate this parameter first. We'll say that if the freight amount is greater than or equal to that parameter value, then I want to display the background in hot pink in this case. Otherwise, another immediate if where I'm doing the row number thing. So the point is just to show that using expressions, you can process pretty much any business logic you can imagine. And you can do some very creative things here. All right, so that's the green bar report. Now, the row number works in a table where we are grouping only on rows. In a matrix, things get a little more complicated. So in this matrix, I'm grouping on quarter up in columns, and then I'm grouping on year on rows, which means as I've got two different groupings going on, I'm going to have to be a little more creative with my expressions. Row number isn't going to work in that case. And so in this example, we've used the running value function, and we're getting a distinct count of the year. And when that distinct count changes, then we're going to take a modulus of that. So we just have to be a little more creative. Again, the point is just to show you that you can process pretty much any logic that you can imagine. All right, let's come back here. All right, now we're going to step off and get into some more creative solutions. We're also going to talk specifically about using paginated reports in the Power BI service. Now, because paginated reports is new in the Power BI service, there are some features, they're nice to have features that we have in SQL Server Reporting Services that are not yet implemented in the Power BI service. And one of them is drill through. We do not have drill through actions in paginated reports. I'm going to show you a slide a little later on that shows some of those things that the product team are still working on. Because the architecture of the Power BI service is different than SQL Server Reporting Services, there are just certain features that they've not been able to implement in the same way, and this is one of them. We don't have the ability to do drill through as a feature within reporting services or paginated reports, but it's still not a hard thing to do. So I'm going to show you a pair of reports. One is a paginated report called Sales Detail Drill Through Target, and their other is a a Power BI interactive report called Sales Analysis. And I actually have examples of here that work both on-prem and in the Power BI service. So I've just named it appropriately. So let me jump over to that demo. So here's my drill through target. You're going to see that this is a fairly simple paginated report with a grouping. So let me just fix this up visually just a little bit. So we'll just apply a background color there. And let's increase the font size a little bit. Just to make that a little easier on the eye. All right. So I have this fairly simple report, but this report is filtered on country and year. So if we go up to parameters, right here, you're going to see that there is a year parameter and a country parameter. If we go to the data set itself and take a look at that query, you're going to see that there is a reference to each of those two parameters within the SQL behind this report. Okay, so just in the where clause where the year field equals the year parameter and the country field equals the country. Simple stuff. You can do more sophisticated filtering, but we're just keeping this simple just to show the concept. All right, so when I run that report, I'm always going to be prompted for a country and a year. I do have default values of 2016 in Canada, so we're only seeing data for 2016 in Canada. Okay, simple stuff. Now, I'm going to deploy this report up to the Power BI service, save my changes. So let's go grab that report. So there's my drill through target right there. So I have a premium per user applied in this workspace. That's how I'm able to publish and be able to view paginated reports in the Power BI service. You can see when I navigate to a report, the report itself actually has this big ID. It's just this big, gob of characters, and that's what actually provides the path to that unique report. So, and actually that's the workspace, that's the report right there. So I'm going to grab that address, copy that to the clipboard. I've already done this, so I'm just kind of doing the cooking show demo. And if I were to add to the end of this URL a question mark RP colon and then year equals 2011, you would see that I can pass parameters in the actual URL query string. So I can pass these parameters right here in the address. So that takes us, just take my word for that. So that takes us to the drill through source. So within my Power BI report, which I'm opening in Power BI Desktop, I need to formulate that complete address with the two parameter values. So we'll wait for that to open up. I am not watching the questions window while we're asking. Oh my gosh, we have a ton of questions. So Doreen and or Liz, I will ask you if you can look over the questions and
sure.
Help me kind of isolate these from questions like, is this being recorded or whatnot?
Yeah, definitely, no problem. Let's see.
Just opened I opened the wrong report.
Okay, can you use the Power BI Enterprise Gateway as a data source in the Power BI Report Builder IDE?
You can certainly use a gateway to connect to data. I'm not understanding the latter part of the question about the report ID. But But if I'm understanding the intent of the question, the answer is yes, absolutely. We can connect to on-prem data from a paginated report, that's available through the gateway.
What Power BI subscription model allows for the posting of Power BI Report Builder reports?
I'm going to cover that in a later slide. That's an excellent question. Quick answer is premium capacity or premium per user.
All right. Is reporting services available in an Azure SQL database?
No. Azure SQL database is only the relational engine. It's not the package of multiple components that we have in the on-prem product. So you don't install Azure SQL, you subscribe to it, and it's essentially a relational database in the cloud. You don't get SSIS, SSAS, and SSRS along with Azure SQL like we do in the on-prem product. Why don't we pause there, and then we'll come back for questions. And it's clear to me that we need to allow for some time for these questions. All right, so here is my source report. This is the report that I want to start from, and the business requirement here is that I have this summary report. I've built a data model and I've visualized this data. Here, obviously, we can see order quantity by country. I can see a time series of order quantity by date. I see my order quantity values or any other measure that I would want, grouped by year and then by country. All good stuff. But this is summary aggregate level data. Then I have another data source that has transactional details, and I would like to be able to navigate to that information. Now, can I put details into a Power BI report? Yeah, absolutely. But let's say in this scenario, it just doesn't make sense to put all of that low-level detail into a data model just so we can view it. I don't need to interact with transactional details. I just want to view it in the context of a selected country and year. So how do we do that? Well, remember earlier I grabbed the address of that paginated report. And the reason that I did that is I've created a parameter. Remember that we're in Power BI now. This is Power BI Desktop. And I've created a parameter called report address. This is in Power Query. So these are parameters created in Power Query. And I've pasted that path to that report. It doesn't really matter what the format is. I just copied and pasted it. Here in Power Query, I actually built a table based on that parameter. And then back in the report designer, I'm able to refer to that address. Now, there's my hidden report address table. And under sales orders, I've created a measure. So now we're looking at DAX code in Power BI. So in this measure, we're going to go grab that report address. And so now I have a variable that has that report address. We're also going to go get the current year and the current country. This suggests that this report would only work in the case that a user has selected a year and selected a country. Now we could build something more sophisticated if we wanted to have default values, but this is just being simple. Now, this is my code for building an on-prem address, so you could do the same thing on-prem, but since we're here in the service, this is the code that I'm going to use to build the appropriate address, passing those two parameters in the Power BI service. You can see that the format is a little bit different. I prefixed my parameters with RP:. So I'm just concatenating that string together. This measure is categorized as a web URL. Then in a table, and there are a number of other visuals that also support the ability to create drill-through links. You can see that I just have this little link icon. So if I were to click on this link next to Australia for 2012, that will open up a web browser, navigate to that paginated report that's published in the Power BI service, and it's passing in the year, passing in the country, which we would see up on the address bar, and then there's my report. Okay, all well and good. So we can use this type of technique to be able to do a drill through action. Now, that's great, but there is a newer capability that allows me to integrate a Power BI interactive report with a paginated report. And that is by using the, oops, there's my drill through. And that is by using a new preview feature called the Paginated Report Visual. This has been out for several months now. It's still in preview though. And this will allow me to embed a paginated report right here inside my Power BI report, which then can be published to the service. So let's take a look at how that works. So just know that I have another version of that green bar report that's published out to the Power BI service. And I want to embed that into a Power BI report. Now this is really done the same way. It's through parameter mapping and parameter passing. Parameters are king. Parameters and expressions. If you can figure out how to do creative things with parameters and expressions, you can do all kinds of crazy things. You can drill back to itself. You can hide and show things. You can expand and collapse things. There's just a lot of very, very interesting things that you can do by using parameters and expressions. And a lot of our report recipes are really based on variations of this pattern. All right, so what I have here, what I'm opening in Power BI Desktop is a very simple Power BI report. This report could be as sophisticated and as busy as you would want it to be, but for our purposes, I just have a bar chart. Actually, it's a table with data bars and a slicer, which I'm waiting for it to open. Okay. And as soon as that opens up, I'm actually going to remove that visual just so I can repeat this. We'll just say we want to remove this. So my objective is to take this paginated report that has a couple of parameters and to embed it right here inside this report page. So there's my paginated report visual. I will connect it to a report. And this one is this one right here. So you can see the workspace and the report. And then I'm going to say I want to set parameters. Now, before I can set parameters, I have to place the fields from my target report in Power BI into this field well. And I can tell you that there are actually some limitations around that. These tables have to be related to each other. And so I had to do some creative things in this data model because these tables aren't really logically related to each other. Let's not get into the weeds, but I'll just mention that this is preview and we've had to be a little creative, but this works. So let's just start with the sales order. So now that the sales order field is added over here, I can go over to sales order, which is showing the parameters of that target report. We're going to say that we want to map this field to that parameter and see the report. Now, right now it's just going to show the first sales order, but if I were to click on sales order 2, I need to click apply changes. We're now seeing this paginated report right here, and it's for that sales order that I've passed in. Now, just to show that you don't have to only pass data, we can also use a slicer to drive parameters. I wanted to change the background color of my green bar report using this slicer. And so to do that, I've created a disconnected table that has the background color. We do need to add that field into the field well. Let's go back, set parameters. We do need to set both of those. So background color maps to background color, sales order maps to sales order, and see the report. Awesome, my session has expired. All right, let's choose light blue and apply changes, and the color should change it. Maybe it didn't see that with my session being expired. Let's go set that again. All right, take my word for it, it works. Just in the interest of time, I don't want to dwell on this. So why would I want to do that? I mean, in Power BI, I can build a table. So I already kind of stated the scenario that this is detail level data that doesn't live in my data model. And, maybe this represents, a table with 1 billion rows in it, and it has a lot of detail that just otherwise isn't appropriate to bring into a semantic data model. This would be a convenient way to do that because this paginated report is based on a SQL query. And I can go back to my database, my source database or my data warehouse, and do this embedded report thing, and then I don't have to bloat the model just for the sake of seeing the details. Secondly, I have all kinds of capabilities within paginated reports that I don't necessarily have in Power BI reports, such as the ability to export to a number of different formats. So now I can accurately export to a PDF, to a PowerPoint, to Excel. Do we have the ability to export data into Excel and Power BI? Yes, but it's not formatted. There are some row limitations, and so this gives me more flexibility for doing that kind of thing. So let me just wrap up the official part of the presentation so that we can get back to our questions. Okay, I'm going to point you to where you can go to see more of these recipes, and hopefully you can leverage this code, or it may inspire you to do some more creative things on your own. One of the contributions to the original recipe book was made by Brian Larson, who actually writes a great series of reporting services books for another publisher. He contributed a matrix or a calendar report that actually shows a calendar in a matrix, which is not something that reporting services does out of the box, but it was a really, really cool way of doing that. Stacia Varga had contributed, she's also an author of the Microsoft Press books on reporting services, how to use JSON functions and JSON data to pass parameters into a reporting services report, etc. So here's the bad news. So these are features that are not yet implemented in paginated reports in Power BI. We do not have shared data sources. And this has been a best practice in reporting services. You set up one data source and then you leverage it in multiple reports. The Power BI architecture doesn't support shared data sources, so report migrations often require you to create individual embedded data sources within reports that you intend to migrate or deploy to the Power BI service. We don't have data-driven subscriptions yet. We have standard subscriptions, but we don't have anything like a data-driven subscription. Chris Webb has actually done a series of blog posts showing how you can use Power Automate to approximate a data-driven subscription. I will tell you that it's not a trivial effort, and it's a very sought-after and recommended feature that we will likely see in the Power BI service sometime in the future. So we talked about native drill-through actions. We have an easy workaround to do that, and we don't have sub-report support for a paginated report inside a paginated report. We have paginated reports inside Power BI reports, but that feature is not yet implemented. And we will likely see features like this and perhaps other features added in the future. So this is where to go. If you would like to download and use these recipes, we have instructions, we have the sample database, and then there are 18 recipes. That just go to my blog at this address. Liz has also posted that in the follow-up email, and I welcome your feedback. Please use my blog to ask questions or provide feedback, and that's just out there to support the community. No charge for that. These are some other great resources. Other books on reporting services. There are no books about paginated reports. It's too new. Just introduced, and it's moving so quickly that I think a lot of authors just don't want to chase it. So if you want to learn how to design reports, read a book about reporting services, and then understand some of the subtle differences with paginated reports. The gentleman who runs the Paginated Report product team, Chris Finland, is a good friend of mine. He has a personal blog where he talks about announcements, things that are coming, and then the official announcements around paginated reports you'll find on the Power BI blog at this address, and this deck will be available for you to reference a little later on. I will also have a copy of this deck available on my blog so that you can follow these links as well. So with that, we are right at time, but I'm happy to take some additional time to answer questions. So let's, and again, Liz, if you can help me moderate a little bit, I see that we have a whole bunch of questions out here.
Yeah, let me see. Let me go through and see what we haven't already covered. Give me just a second. I'm making the questions panel a little bigger.
I see Carlos' question. Why isn't SSRS in Azure? I can't answer that question because I don't work for Microsoft. Paginated, sometimes described as pixel perfect, is it really to that degree of detail? John, I like your question. I'm going to kind of answer it directionally, and that is that the purpose of Power BI and the purpose of reporting services were different. Power BI was not architected as a product to create forms, invoices, labels, you know, the kinds of things that we would use traditional operational reports for. And so I think Paginated Reports fills that gap effectively. So yes, I agree that, that describing SSRS or Paginated Reports as pixel perfect is fairly accurate. You know, are they always aligned to the pixel? Well, there are some exceptions, but for the most part, what you see is exactly what you get when you export or print that report. Not so much with Power BI. Reminds me of good old access programming. You are right, Donald. That's because that's the product that evolved into SSRS and Paginated Reports. Can you show us how to format text in the report, such as making it bold or strike through? Lila, we're out of time, but yes, we have plenty of examples of that in well, all my books, but both the recipe book and the 2016 book, which is the last version specific book. It's the same technique. You're using expressions to modify properties of your text. So that would be the font weight property to make it bold, and it would be a VB expression just like I showed you. Use Power BI Enterprise Gateway, we talked about that. Can you point us to any recipe that will allow both limiting the number of rows per page and place the equivalent of scroll bar functionality for mini reports? That's a big question, Rich. I think we'd really need to get into the weeds on that, but yeah, I don't have a quick and easy answer for you, but yes, you can certainly limit the number of items per page. Robert did write about conditional pagination based on row count. And I don't know if that was in our original recipe book, but I know that he's also blogged about that. So that's out there. Sean, is this a live report or loaded as a data set? So the paginated report is live in that it's a SQL query that gets executed every time the report runs. Can we implement RLS on a paginated report? Absolutely. So your paginated report can be based on a Power BI data set or an SSAS model. And if you've implemented row-level security within the model, then yes, when the user runs the report, we know who the user is, and so RLS will definitely work. If the report is based on a SQL query, then you can use SQL Server row-level security to do exactly the same thing. So the answer is yes to your question, regardless of how we're implementing it. Do you have or are you aware of a resource that details migrating from on-prem SSRS using stored procedures to Power BI? Corey, excellent question. No, I'm not aware of a written resource. or a specific blog. Sounds like something maybe I should blog about. I can tell you this, that we at 3Cloud have done a few migration projects. One of my colleagues, Robin Abramson, recently migrated about 450 SSRS reports to Paginated Reports and has a lot of stories to tell about that. So we would love to talk to you about that if you have that need. I'm not aware of anyone who has posted, blogged, or published anything specifically on that topic, but sounds like a good blog topic. Can you paste the URLs into the chat that Paul indicated earlier? We will be following up with a link to the deck. Where do we find free books? So again, on my blog, the 18 recipes are available for you for absolutely free. The other books that I referenced, including mine, are not free. So, but there are lots of community available materials out there, my blog included, but you know, a lot of the you know, my colleagues in the industry who also blog about these things support the industry, and that's available for free. I think that's the end of our questions, and we're now 7 minutes past the hour.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Paul, for staying on longer, and thank you for those of you that hung on with us. As we've mentioned, we will be sending out the recording also with links to all the resources that Paul shared, including his presentation tomorrow, so keep an eye out for that. If you have any questions in the meantime, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you, Paul, so much for a great presentation as always, and thank you, everyone else. We will see you on the next session.
Thank you, everyone. Good day.